Hello, fellow nerds, writers, and general appreciators of good storytelling. In this video, I'll be comparing two scenes from House of the Dragon and Rings of Power, and discuss why one works and the other doesn't. Be advised this video will contain spoilers for both shows. Since the House of the Dragon episode aired first, let's begin our discussion there. In episode 8 of House of the Dragon, King Viserys is lying in his bed, being assisted by his wife, Queen Alicent, in being made comfortable for the night before she also retires. Having been given milk of the poppy to ease his pain, Viserys' mind drifts back to a conversation he had with Rhaenyra earlier in the episode, and a question she asked him that he had not answered. Lost in that memory, Viserys mistakes Alicent for being his daughter and tells her, "You wanted to know if I believe it to be true. Don't you remember? Aegon, his dream, the song of ice and fire. It is true, what he saw in the north, the prince that was promised, the prince to unite the realm against the cold and dark. It is you. You are the one. You must do this." During this, Alicent voices her confusion as to what Viserys is talking about, and when she hears the name Aegon, she asks our son, and believes Viserys is talking about their son Aegon II, instead of the king's ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror. Alicent leaves the bedroom, fully convinced her husband wants her to put Aegon on the throne after his death, instead of his previously named heir, Rhaenyra. She doesn't know Viserys dies shortly after she leaves. In episode 8 of Rings of Power, King Tar-Palantir is lying on his deathbed, and Elendil's daughter, Earien, who is an apprentice in the Builders Guild, is drawing his likeness while he is asleep. He moans, and she takes a cloth to dab at his face, and the king suddenly awakens, grabbing her wrist and saying, "I know what you have been doing in the dark of night, when you thought all eyes were asleep." Earien apologizes, and Tar-Palantir says, "Then there is still time." When the girl inquires, "Time for what?" the king says, "To warn you, young Muriel." When Earien tries to tell him she is not the Queen Regent Muriel, Tar-Palantir interjects with, "Queen yet? No, but you will be, so know this. If the old ways of our people are not soon restored, our island will fall." When he starts coughing, Earien runs off to call for help. When she comes back, the king is out of bed and opening a secret passageway, telling her, "Come, you must go up. But don't do as I did. I looked for too long, and now I cannot separate what is from what was from what will be." She leaves him gasping for breath and collapsed in a chair while she goes in, finds a secret room, and sees something covered by a cloth. Earien starts to pull the cloth away, and the scene ends. Now, both scenes are supposed to be uh-oh moments, where the audience is supposed to be saying to themselves, "Uh-oh, she shouldn't be hearing this. She's going to get the wrong idea, and she's not going to follow what the king intends because she's not the one his words are meant for." But House of the Dragon pulls it off while it falls flat in Rings of Power. Here's why. The House of the Dragon sets up this scene so that it happens naturally between major characters we know and whose motivations are known to us, so that Alicent misinterpreting what Viserys says and how she acts on it makes sense, while in Rings of Power, the scene happens between two minor characters, who are virtual strangers not only to each other, but also to the audience. And the way the scene unfolds feels more contrived for the sake of something happening, rather than because prior events set it up. We are emotionally and mentally engaged with Viserys' deathbed scene because, by the time it happens at the end of the episode, Paddy Considine, the actor playing him, has delivered his best performance when he entered the throne room in agony, yet determined to sit on the throne and defend his grandson and daughter. Episode 8 of House of the Dragon was set up to be the best episode of the season because of the previous 7 episodes. From the very first episode, we had gotten to know Viserys as a character and watched him go from a happy, healthy man to be burdened by sorrow and worry and the strange disease that ravaged his body for nigh 20 years. At times, he was thought to be a weak king because he was slow to make decisions that would lead to war, and though he may not have always made the right decision, his goal was to always keep peace in the kingdom, as well as in his family, so he could play with his Lego set. Alicent is also a character we have gotten to know since the beginning, from the impressionable teenager to the bitter religious zealot she becomes as an adult, manipulating people to get what she wants, and thoroughly convinced she needs to oppose Rhaenyra at every turn to save herself and her children. Viserys and Alicent have many conversations together throughout the season, some of them about the line of succession, and while first Alicent was supportive of Viserys' choice for heir, manipulation from her father and Larys Strong, as well as her own misunderstanding of events, persuade Alicent into believing Rhaenyra will kill the queen's children, her half-siblings, in order to solidify her claim to the throne, so that by the time of her last conversation with Viserys, Alicent is all too willing to believe Viserys is giving her permission to put her son on the throne, as that falls in line with what she has wanted for years. Despite Aegon II being a drunkard, womanizer, and all-around general no-account layabout, Alicent wants to put him on the throne, believing she is influential enough to rule through him.
I wonder where I've seen that before.
We, the audience, can only watch helplessly, as in the next 2 episodes, the ramifications of Alicent hearing Viserys' last words leads the Blacks and the Greens into civil war, undoing everything that Viserys had held together. Episode 8 of House of the Dragon was made memorable not only by the acting, but also the conclusion of Viserys' story, roaring like a dragon one last time before being reunited in death with his first wife Aemma. We, the audience, roared with him when he walked to the throne. We smiled as he smiled at seeing his whole family at dinner with him, and we tearfully said goodbye to him as he breathed his last. Episode 8 of Rings of Power, the finale, however, hit a bit differently. In fact, it had the exact opposite effect on audiences, leaving them feeling underwhelmed at what should have been the climax of the show. And some of this is due to scenes being included in the finale that add nothing to it, like Tar-Palantir's deathbed scene. As I stated previously, this scene happens between 2 minor characters, neither of whom we have gotten to know aside from the basics. We see Tar-Palantir 2 times in previous episodes before his last scene. Once when he is asleep and his daughter, Queen Regent Muriel, is standing by his bed waiting for Galadriel to show up. And the second time he is walking with Muriel around his room, telling her not to go to Middle-earth because darkness awaits her there. Now, this line is to foreshadow Muriel being blinded in episode 7, but as it was implied that the Palantir only shows the fall of Numenor, it is unclear if the king actually has the gift of foresight or if this was merely contrived dialogue for the sake of setting up foreshadowing. What we are told of Tar-Palantir is that he was dethroned for wanting to turn his people back to the old ways. And since they're all elf haters for some reason, they weren't having that. He's sick and dying and is kept locked up in the tower like Rapunzel.
What? Really?
Oh yes, Galadriel even breaks through a window in one episode, like the prince from the fairy tale, to free the king from his imprisonment. I mean, to demand he gives her an army so she can wage war in the Southlands. Earien is also a character we know little about. From her first appearance in episode 4, we learn she is the daughter of Elendil, the ship captain who rescued Galadriel and Halbrand from certain death, and wants to be an apprentice in the Builders Guild, and is sister to the spaced-out Isildur. She draws, skips out on her assigned chores, attracts the notice of Chancellor Pharazon's son, who is called, something, and is unhappy her people are going to war. Why she is unhappy about this is never explained. Earien has very little dialogue, and aside from her voicing her displeasure at doing menial tasks, or that the Númenóreans are going to war, the character seems to have very little relevance aside from pep-talking her brother and something. In her final scene, her presence at the king's bedside makes no sense. Pharazon sets up the scene by telling several apprentices that the king is dying, and so all the master craftsmen are submitting their ideas for his tomb. And Earien is in the group of apprentices chosen to do the same. This is confusing because if apprentices would be chosen for such an honor, it should be senior apprentices, people who have been learning their craft for several years, not a beginner who's only been an apprentice for a week, and she should not be alone in the room. You don't leave a nameless nobody alone with the king, even if he was dethroned. Tar-Palantir is still important. Otherwise, why would he still be wearing a crown, and why would the people who usurped him wish to immortalize him in stone? It is known to the entire kingdom that Tar-Palantir is dying, The ships are being ready to display the black flags. The master craftsmen are preparing plans for his tomb. There should be at least 2 people stationed in his room at all time. You know, to be present for when the king finally passes so they can report it. Alicent being alone with Viserys at least was something set up from previous episodes, as she would send the servants away while she tended to her husband when he was ailing. Both Alicent and Viserys have known each other for years, while Tar-Palantir and Earien have never met before. Alicent, as queen, has the power to influence events as a result to what she hears Viserys say, whereas Earien is an apprentice from a family that has very little, if any, political power. And if she does see the fall of Numenor, the only thing she can do with that knowledge is tell Pharazôn, something, or her father, and they use the information to their advantage. She can't do anything with it to empower her position. There is also the conditions each king is in when they mistake Alicent and Earien as their daughters. Viserys is in a dark room. He lost one eye to the disease he has and keeps his remaining eye closed as he fights for every breath to speak. He never looks directly at Alicent. Tar-Palantir, on the other hand, is in a brightly lit room. Both of his eyes are clear, and nothing was established before that his eyesight was poorly. He looks directly at Eärien and thinks she is Muriel, and I gotta say, they look nothing alike. There is also the subject matter Viserys and Tar-Palantir talk about. Aegon the Conqueror's dream is mentioned in episode 1, episode 4, twice in episode 8, and again in episode 10. Each time it's mentioned, it has an effect on the characters and their motivation. It plagues Viserys, whether he has chosen the right heir, whether he can instill in his daughter the importance of keeping the realm united. To Rhaenyra, it solidifies her desire to be queen, and to try and avoid plunging the kingdom into civil war. The Palantir in Rings of Power is seen in episode 4, and seems to only have one channel, showing the fall of Numenor to whoever touches it. This vision is shown twice, both times in episode 4. The Palantir is not mentioned or referenced again until episode 8, and it is not seen as the scene ends before Eärien fully pulls the cloth off it. The vision motivated the old king to try and turn his people back to the old ways, but it does not motivate Muriel to change her mind about sending Galadriel away. The White Tree does that, and the Palantir and what it showed is never mentioned by the Queen Regent again. So the Palantir and his vision are dropped from the audience's memory after episode 4, and not even seen again in episode 8, merely referenced through an old man's ramblings to a girl who has no idea what he's saying, and has no prior knowledge to make any sense of it. Unlike Alicent, who was told by Viserys in episode 3 of a dream he had, of placing his son on the throne and putting the Conqueror's crown on his head. A conversation Alicent remembers as she states to her father that Aegon II will wear his ancestor's crown when he takes the throne. Both Aegon's dream and the Palantir were secrets passed down from father to heir, but one serves a clear purpose, and you don't need to have watched Game of Thrones in order to understand it, while the other is a handy little device to cause tension between characters and be dropped from the story when no longer needed, only to be teased but not shown again. A mystery box. We have no idea in what direction the writers will take it. To watch both of these episodes a few days apart, to go from the best episode of House of the Dragon to Rings of Power anticlimactic finale was quite the emotional drop. After House of the Dragon's episode 8 aired, Amazon should have cut the king's deathbed scene from Rings of Power because in the shadow of House of the Dragon, it just pales in comparison and looks like a cheap copy. You know that meme? Hey, can I copy your homework? Sure, just change it so it looks different. Yeah, that was this scene. One leaves you fearful of what is to follow, knowing civil war is around the corner, angry that Alicent, mistaken what Viserys was talking about, will lead to her putting her crummy son on the throne, and sad yet happy that at least Viserys died peacefully, believing he had finally succeeded in uniting both sides of his family. While the other just leaves you confused as to why it's there because you don't know these characters and you haven't been given enough to care about them. In conclusion, the scene in House of the Dragons episode 8 successfully shows the payoff to efficient world building, character development, and events being set up. The scene is done by an actor and actress who can actually act and emote. Viserys' rattling breath, the pain he feels as he tries to speak, Alicent's sorrow at seeing him in pain despite having milk of the poppy, and her confusion and then determination to honor what she thinks is his request to put Aegon on the throne. The scene in Rings of Power's episode 8 falls flat because the writers do not carefully set up the world building, character development, or events that lead to the finale. things just happen for the sake of something happening, and we are left feeling underwhelmed. Both shows have many characters, but House of the Dragon has those characters interacting with each other as the story progresses, whereas Rings of Power has about 4 different plots going on, and very little interactions between characters from those different plots. It's easy to see which scene is the superior one. This concludes my first scene comparison, and I want to thank you all for hanging out with me while I went through this. I did this because I really enjoyed the first season of House of the Dragon, and think Paddy Considine deserves an Emmy for his outstanding performance as Viserys Targaryen, and I'm looking forward to watching season 2. I did not enjoy watching Rings of Power, and had I been watching it by myself, I would have quit after watching the 3rd episode. But I was watching with Grim Media and TCAP on Grim Media's channel, and I did have some fun helping Graham make video content. I recommend you check out his channel for our videos on Rings of Power's characters, the Harfoots, and what a comedy of errors the show was. Suffice it to say, I will not be watching season 2 of Rings of Power when it does come out. I gave the first season a go and was not impressed. I hope you all have a great day, and may the blessing of elves, men, and all free folk go with you.